Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Signature Sip podcast, the health and wellness segment. Today, I'm super excited because we have a very special guest and a dear friend, Sara Zaki. Thank you for joining us. She is classically trained as a registered dietitian who has always had a massive passion for the holistic side of living and wellness and all of the fun stuff. And she actually recently started her own business called Honey and Hope 61. We have a little surprise in here. We're going to show it off. And it is a modern cottage apothecary. Sara, thank you for coming on. I'm Nino. Again, I'm sure you guys already know. And we have Jackie Villano here co-hosting. But thank you for coming on, Sara.
Of course. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself and just kind of give us a brief intro?
Absolutely. Yeah. So like you said, I'm clinically trained as a dietitian, but I always liked the more natural side of things. So I was always pursuing more herbal medicine, natural medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, you name it. I've done, different certifications and whatnot. Had a small window where I went to pharmacy school thinking that I wanted to learn both ends of healthcare. And I think it has a great place, but I just really wanted to be somebody who was pioneering more the side of what we can use that's right outside our door, in our backyards, grandma's kitchen kind of stuff. Because that's how I grew up. I'm Eastern European, first generation, and, things work also. So I think no matter what, we always needed that support to support our body, because that's the foundation. So the other things are this beautiful addition at times, and it is like super helpful. But I wanted to just be on that side of, things. So I left pharmacy school, went back more into nutrition, a lot of that, became a dietitian, and pursued more so the functional medicine, integrative medicine route, using what I know, which is, plants, foods, things like that, nose to tail eating, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. And then Honey and Hope is, it's a passion project. I think I look back at all of the different experiences that I've had, from schooling to working in dialysis and the clinical setting, hospitals, a lot of recovery centers and whatnot, owning my own private practice, you name it. But what I really loved was curating herbs and items that I knew were organic, that were pure, that were small batch, that were really bringing in and preserving those properties.
Super intentional.
Yes. And I know that unfortunately, when I go to certain stores that maybe have like the supplement section, there's so much confusion about supplements. It's like, that is a loaded topic. And there's some great ones out there, but unfortunately there's a lot of things with fillers, or it's just slightly more molecularly a little bit different, but then it acts completely different in the body, but you get a cheaper price tag and whatnot. So I basically took everything that we use in our house that went to friends and family. And then the ask for it became a little too demanding back in like 2019, 2020. And I said, I think we're going to have to start charging for this, because I can't keep, I'm like,
she's like, hold on a second.
Sure,
this is,
yeah. And like the kitchen pots kept getting bigger and bigger for these vats of elderberry. And then I had like cauldrons basically on my little stove. And my husband was like, we should start a business. And everything with him, he's like, we should start a business. We should start a bit. We can make a business out of that. So it's funny because he's
great. That's great that you have that support, though. You know.
But he's funny because he'll say, we can do this. And he holds the belief, like he has the faith in something and he has no blueprint to do any of it.
But at least
sometimes you need that. And I love that.
You do. Yeah. You need that. I need him because I'm like, oh, you really think, okay, all right. And then,
because it inspires you even more. It gives you that extra like push that you probably needed, because you're overwhelming yourself, probably thinking, how am I logistically going to make this work and do this? But the fact that you have him in your corner saying, we're going to do it. And you're like, you know what? We are going to do it.
Yes. He's like, we'll get it done. It's no big deal. I'll help you. It's always, I'll help you. So that's what we did. And then we started then having to ship out of the, township and county. And then it started we were shipping nationwide basically. And we couldn't really keep up. And we had no dining room table for months. It was just shipping boxes constantly. And then I was also pregnant with my daughter in 2020 into 2021. And at 8.5 months pregnant, I said, I don't think I can be on my feet and doing this. It's a lot of work. So we tabled it, and I wanted to be a mom, first and foremost, and just soak in those years. And they were really hard years too. We had a lot of loss. We had, tragedy strike, but joy with our daughter. And, with that, we just waited really. And the name Honey and Hope 61 was given to me like 3 years ago, because I thought we were going to bring it back, and she'll be 5 next month. So I was set, and then we didn't do it. And then the next year hit, and we were set, and it was a no. And then even last year, I believe, we actually, partnered with a commercial kitchen to produce everything. And I came down with Lyme disease. I mean, I have chronic Lyme, but it came out of remission, and it turned out I had mold poisoning. And I was so sick, and I didn't know it at first. So it was not the right time, but I was undergoing some treatment and did a lot of more natural side of things too. And with that, here we are. Honey and Hope 61 is finally here. We just launched, and I just think I've been in the world of nutrition and health, wellness for 22 years.
Wow.
Now. So it is 22 years in the making. It's everything I wanted to do that I didn't even know until I got started. And I'm just excited. So I guess we'll share more about that. That's where I'm at now.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely appreciate you sharing that and kind of giving that context, and hearing that is like so inspiring, because it's a journey. And, I think it also, that quote about like timing is everything. I truly believe in that, because there are certain things that maybe you're meant to do, or certain things are supposed to happen, and the time is just not right. And I think it's having the ability to reflect and not get discouraged by it, to say that, you had to table that, and it wasn't, oh, I'm going to table this forever, because it's still on my heart, but I am aware that right now isn't exactly the timing for it. And when the right time comes, it'll be known,
Yes.
So from that perspective, that says a lot, right? And
Absolutely.
you've been through your own journey through dealing with personal health issues and all of that led you here. And that's also kind of how you and I connected, which is funny. So we actually met over Instagram after I had quit medical school and wanted to get into more of the natural world, and also had a similar belief where I had healed my thyroid. And I was off of medication, and I was in medical school, and I realized, what am I doing here? And that's not to downplay medicine, because I don't want it to come off that way. I think that medicine is important. It saves lives, and it does a lot, it helps a lot of people. But there's also a lot that we can do on our end preventatively before we have to seek that sort of help, to the point where it's like, nothing else can help me but this, right? So what do we do in our daily life, our lifestyle, what we're putting into our body or on our bodies, that play a factor into how our body functions? Are we giving it everything that it needs to really thrive, right? And allow our cells on a cellular level to do everything they need to do functionality wise to, if we get sick, like, is our body capable of fighting that, right? Or if we're going through something, can we do anything to help heal naturally before we seek alternatives, right? And so I understand that side of things. Can you share a little bit more of what really drove you, I would say, from a personal experience? I know you mentioned the Lyme. So is that something that you've kind of battled for a while?
Yes. So I was undiagnosed with Lyme disease for probably think about 1 to 2 years. And it was actually discovered by a naturopath that I worked with eventually. I went to rheumatoid arthritis. I went to rheumatologist, got ruled out for rheumatoid arthritis and all these different aches and pains. And, went to every specialist under the sun. And I was told I had a vitamin D deficiency. And I said, I think this is more than a vitamin D deficiency, but thank you so much. And, there's different schools of thoughts. And the way that I look at it is they're all modalities. So I like to use analogies in a lot of what I explain. So hang with me for a second. But if you've ever had your car, let's say you need brakes on your car, right? And there's a muffler shop down your street. So that's what they specialize in. So you need brakes and you're like, well, this is down the street. Let me just go there. They're going to try and sell you on a muffler because they don't do brakes. So they're maybe can do something, because they're still mechanics in some sense, but they're really going to try to focus on, but you really could use a muffler. And that's okay. But if that's not what you actually needed or plugging into your body, using as a body, right, then you're only going to get so far. And there's so many modalities. And I think what's beautiful, I've worked alongside hundreds of doctors at this point, everything from ICU to dialysis. I've sat in the quality meetings. I've had to run numbers. Even as in kidney care, dietitians have a unique role. They're a little more hands-on, we'll just say. There's a lot of algorithms and there's titrations and things like that for certain medications. You're watching labs like a hawk. In dialysis, there's a failed organ that we are sustaining through a machine 3 times a week, basically, which is the kidney, right? So with that, your potassium, your sodium, your phosphorus, your calcium, your parathyroid hormone, your hemoglobin, your iron, all of it goes haywire because the kidneys are a big function of all of that. Your vitamin D, that's all nutrition.
Right.
So you have a major complication in the medical, right? But that's all nutrition. So, and it's incredible because we see the fragility of these patients, and then, they're very sick patients. It's hard to get their idea of stable is living with a failed organ. Right.
That's their base. That's
Yes.
kind of like their baseline there.
Yeah. So we would look at labs everywhere from every few days, if it was a potassium, to weekly, to monthly. We always ran monthlies. And based on that, everything would have to be titrated, from their diet to their medication to their phosphate binders, all these different things. But when you look at that, it just goes to show the foundation is still affecting nutritionally. And obviously, there's great medication at that point. You do need it. But when I started to see these things, I really got to study the understanding of both sides of healthcare. I've worked with great physicians. I've sat in on some really cool things, even up at St. Barnabas in the burn ICU, and how your protein needs go up, like they skyrocket if you have a major burn and you're in, the hospital for it. They give zinc for skin renewal, vitamin C for skin renewal, and you need a lot of protein, amino acids. So again, nutrition. And one thing that was really sweet, when I was in my 20s, I was nannying for a family, and very special family to me, still super near and dear to my heart. And the husband was a physician and the wife is an attorney. And he had invited me to work in his private practice while I was still in grad school, I believe, at the time. And, he said, Sara, my patients need nutrition. And 1, I don't have the time. And 2, I don't have the complete skill set. He goes, I can give a little bit about watch your blood sugar if you have diabetes, or your cholesterol if you have high cholesterol. But what they really need is actually you, not me specifically, but, nutritionists, dietitians. He said, because most of their problems would be solved if we could get that under control. So when I saw all of that, and also being really sick through Lyme, but in earlier years, I was born with really aggressive asthma, allergies, eczema. I was very allergic to everything. Didn't know I had an autoimmune even from a very young age. But with that, I was on a lot of asthma medication, allergy medication around the clock. I mean, my mom used to joke and say I was allergic to planet Earth. So I was probably about 18, 19, just going into college. And there I was whipping up teas and using essential oils and learning nutrition, but at the same time in my kitchen working more holistically, working with plants and not just studying about vitamins or body systems. And I also had terrible gastrointestinal difficulties, I think because of all the medication I was on from a young age. It was just too much, but it kept me alive. What were you supposed to do?
Right.
I mean, but there was no repair and restoration. And that's, I think, the short circuit between bridging the two worlds.
Yes.
Is if someone's going to be put on something, the question is always, this is what I'm asking myself, even when I did private practice and had patients. And it was, okay, so when we take this medication, what body systems is it impacting? What pathways is it impacting? How does it break down? What's its half-life? Is it going to start to pull from the bone and create brittle bone after a while, if they're on it long term? What's the plan for going on? And what's the plan for coming off? Is there a plan for coming off of it? And these were all questions that I didn't usually get a lot of answers when I would ask my patients, so what did your doctor say? And they just didn't know, or they said, I'm just on it forever. But then, one thing causes another. And now they're on another medication to remedy this. And at that point, sometimes the multivitamin is not going to cut it, or the probiotic, or whatever it might be. So having my own health struggle, but also being really dependent on certain things that saved my life, I saw this gap that I really wanted to close, which was, how do we replete our bodies in a way that allow it to maybe need less of the prescribed side of things and kind of start to offset. I think of it like balance, like a balance, it's like two levers, right? And if like medication helps to bring the symptoms way down, but now you're out of balance here. If we start to pour back into here, the hope is that we level out. So if that's the case, then this would be coming maybe a little less on the medication, or instead of 5, now you're on 3, because in some states, like, you may never be able to come off of everything, and that's okay. But what could we do to still plug in to give the body what it needs? And how much can we reverse potentially? So I healed my gut in my 20s. I healed my asthma. I hadn't owned or used an inhaler for 15 years, that was remarkable. I was hospitalized when I was a kid all the time because of how severe my respiratory issues were. I was on a nebulizer like 4 times a day in the spring. So for me to go from that to nothing was unbelievable. So that's where I was really sold. And then when the Lyme came in, I really studied my options, for treatment. And I knew I was already a year or 2 in, so without having that diagnosis. So I knew I wanted to go the more natural route. People thought I was crazy, and I do understand why. Yeah,
I feel like now it's not as a crazy topic, but I feel like even just a few years ago, it was still a little wild for some people, right? Like you were kind of going against the grain. As opposed, even now for some people right now as well, but I do feel like it's becoming more of a trend or popular to be self-aware and things like that. But a couple of years ago, it was, what? You're doing what? You're not eating that? You're limiting yourself to that. Why would you limit yourself? And it's like, no, I'm not limiting myself. You don't understand my why, because my why, I don't see it as limiting myself. I see it as I'm taking control of my body so that I can function better, because it makes me feel more whole and alive and energized and not drained and foggy and just trying to make it through the day because I don't feel 100%.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you mentioned something important too, which again, it's not meant to say, okay, the medicine isn't for me. It's about bridging that gap. And I think that one of the things that people don't think about often enough, it's not just abandoning all the more clinical side of things. It's about, okay, if I have to be on medication, or if I'm, starting the route of medication, or I'm seeing a practitioner for that, what can I do, more naturally to make sure that I don't have any further side effects, or I'm not putting my body in a worse position that I started in, because this is going to draw, from my natural microbiome, especially when you're talking about being on medication and gut health, which I know that we're going to get to too, because there's a big connection there. Huge. So it's not, again, abandoning everything more, I don't want to say traditional, because I think the more holistic side is actually the more traditional piece of it, honestly.
That's true.
But kind of bringing both in, that way you have this nice balance, and they can complement each other.
Yeah. Speaking of the gut, so in 2011, I was in grad school, and I had to conduct a research study. So my research topic was a little off the beaten path at the time. And I had started a few year or two prior, I'd started studying epigenetics, which is basically like how your genetics switch on and off, and how they use this analogy where it's like, you can have, I don't know if it's the best analogy, but it's like you can have a loaded gun, but the epigenetics, it pulls the trigger depending on your environment or stress or diet, lifestyle, whatnot. And it's basically like little on and off switches,
It's actually fascinating.
Yeah. So the way that I look at it too with that is, in certain families, there may be a tendency for obesity and diabetes, let's just say. And in another family, that might not be the case. It might be heart disease and arthritis. Why? We don't know exactly, but we know that genetics plays some role. And so that's still not to say that the person who has a family where everybody's got diabetes down to great Aunt Sally is going to have diabetes. It means that when the body becomes imbalanced, the path it's going to tend to take is going to be toward the diabetes. And in the family with the arthritis, when the body is going to become imbalanced and it's got a little bit of that weakness naturally, it needs more fortification, more support. It's going to lean toward that, arthritis. So it's still, knowing those things is still helpful, because it also tells us, okay, so we know. We're getting a clue into ancestry, family lineage through that to know what should we be doing then. That's all it is. It's just information at first.
I think that part of it is huge, because it gives you an understanding to say, if you know what to expect, you kind of know which rabbit hole to start going down towards in regards to educating yourself and learning more about it, because let's be real, right? There's like a million different things that can happen in the body. And if it's almost kind of like marketing actually, and business, right? The way you get better in marketing or in business is not actually doing more stuff. It's figuring out what's not working to stop it. And I just said that analogy.
Right. I love it.
It's really like, this is like where it's like my marketing and like my science background that interact. But
and knowing your audience, right?
Yeah.
Which is knowing your predispositions in the nutrition world.
Exactly. So it's figuring out, well, what is the thing that's actually limiting us? Or what is that one thing that's hurting us and it's impacting everything else? So similar to the body, if we can understand, well, what is that? So if we can figure out what we predisposition,
what we have a predisposition to, Joe.
What pathway the body's going to take.
Can you tell that English is not my first language?
You should just say it in Russian.
Yeah.
And then you can
if you're not sure, just say it in a different language. Say your first language, and then we'll be like, okay, we're just gonna go with that.
Translate. Shut the rubbish.
Yeah, if we know what path our body can possibly go toward, if our body is in balance, then at least we know what we can start educating ourselves on, right? Because so many different things can happen. But if we have that slight clue, like you're saying, that gives us actually an advantage. Well, I know that if I'm not 100% and if my body is not optimally performing to its highest potential and I am dealing with an imbalance of something and it's affecting me on a cellular level, there is a high chance that most likely I can develop XYZ because this is in my genetics. So in that case, all right, let me start really going heavy and educating myself on this to understand, well, what can I do? Can I do anything to heal it? Also, what kind of a disorder is this? Is it an autoimmune disorder, or is this something that affects whatever else? And I'll give you, I guess, an exact example because I hate talking vaguely because I want to make my point. So I have familial hypercholesterolemia. I was diagnosed at 10 years old after my dad passed. And we didn't know what this was, right? All we knew was high cholesterol, high cholesterol, high cholesterol, right? And come to find out, they're like, no, this is more of a genetic disorder, so-and-so. At the time, this was in 2002, there was no genetic testing. Few years later, but keep in mind, there was no genetic testing. There was really not much research done on kids with this particular condition. And they just went off of like whatever research studies they had based on adults, not a lot of kids in research studies on medication. However, because mine and my sister's cholesterol was so high for our age, it was over 410 as a 10-year-old. They were scared and they put us on medication for statin, Lipitor. Lipitor was kind of new to the market. They were also experimenting with how many milligrams to give us at that age. My sister was only 7. And we were also put onto thyroid medication because I had an underactive thyroid. And growing up that way, it was confusing because at the time I was young, I didn't fully understand. And I was also going through grief. Like I just lost my dad. So it wasn't the primary focus. As I got older and started to become more aware, entered my teenage years, right? And we all know how that goes of, well, why does this happen? Why do I have to live like this? I was very quiet. Like, I know people know me now, but like, you know, in junior high school, like I didn't speak. I went through a phase of just super internal, kept all my feelings inside, didn't have a lot of friends. Not that I didn't have a lot of friends. I was always nice with everyone, but I only had a few very, very close friends because I just wasn't really out there. Dealing with a lot of grief at the time. And eventually I started to get curious. And I hated the fact that I was on medication. I hated the fact that I would be going to all these different specialists and doctors and things like that. What really set me off is I had to wear a heart monitor to junior high school. And I did dance class. I was in dance talent. So, you know, you have your leotard, you have to change and things like that. That day traumatized me till this day because I remember that feeling because I was like, well, do I have to go to school? Can I just not go to school? Like, I don't want to. By the way, the monitor was like this big, okay, on a little like teenage girl's body, okay? So you can see that I had it on under my clothes. I think I wore 2 sweaters in hopes of hiding it. And they're like, no, you have to go to school. You have to, because they're tracking your heart rate and like everything and how it's going throughout your normal day. So they're like, you have to go to school, you have to do this. Plus my mom had to go to work, like, so I couldn't stay home. So traumatizing. And I think that's what kind of lit a fire inside me, which is I need to figure this out. And I didn't figure it out then. It's only as I got older, probably getting into high school, because then, you know, there was YouTube and there was all these videos and I started reading. The internet was, you know, I learned how to properly use the internet. It wasn't just like, you know, to sign on to do something. And I came across a lot of videos, and then I came across this influencer, a blogger. She was all into holistic, natural healing, and she was dealing with, I think she was pre-diabetic or something like that. And she had healed her body through food. Really. And I started consuming this. And then I thought to myself, well, if someone else can do this with whatever they're dealing with, maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that I could potentially heal my body too and not have to rely on medication, right? And that's where like the thoughts started. And I couldn't find a single research paper related to familial hypercholesterolemia and nutrition. Eventually, I did find some research on healing the thyroid and reversing that, because the thyroid is more of like an autoimmune issue, and started consuming more of that. In high school, no, I think it was after college, is when I actually did go get a genetic test done, and confirmed which specific gene was affected for the high cholesterol. And that did help me, because in high school, after I found this influencer girl and started healing, I actually went on my own journey of trying a million different diets. So whatever diet you name, I'll probably say, yes, I've tried that. Because for me, it was never about, oh, I want to be skinnier, or I want to lose weight, or I want to do this. My why was always, I want to get off of medication. So my why was so big that it didn't matter what that diet was, because oftentimes people go on diets and they're like complaining. They're like, I can't eat this anymore. And it's like, I never had that. Like, I never dealt with that, because it wasn't about the food. For me, it was, I just need to heal my body. I don't care what it takes. If I have to be on lettuce and water to do it, I will do it, just to prove a point. Like, that's how committed I was. And so the funny thing is, nothing ever worked. And I did vegan, I did raw vegan, I did pescatarian, I did vegetarian, I did just whole foods. Like, I mean, I've done them all. However, anytime I took my blood work and I wasn't on my medication for my cholesterol, it was always, always elevated. And for reference, my cholesterol these days without medication is over 500, close to 600 total. My LDL is like really bad. And so that just confirmed when I did the genetic testing finally, as when I got older, that yeah, there's like, it's hard to do this, because the problem is, because now I understood it on a cellular level. There's 4 or 5 genes. There's a gene that gets affected, and it causes 4 to 5 different mutations on the LDL receptors on your liver. This was the first time ever since I was 10 years old that I finally got answers to what I'm dealing with. Because before that, it was, oh, well, you just have genetically high cholesterol. I go, I understand, but like, what does that mean? And I would go see dietitians, I would go see nutritionists, I would go see cardiologists, everybody. And no, you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. There's nothing you can do about it. Oh, and also make sure that you're not eating bacon, that you're not eating this, you're not eating that, and all this stuff. Like, they scare you, right? Like, everything has to be fat-free.
And it's
like,
an assumption too. We're just assuming.
Correct. Exactly. There's no guarantee that that's
high in cholesterol, therefore don't eat it.
Therefore don't eat it.
Problem?
But is that the problem? Correct. And so so going back to what we were talking about, now that I know, okay, this is actually what's happening on the cellular level or genetically, right? Where there is a gene that's causing a mutation, and this is the mutation that it's causing. So now I have to ask myself, great, now I know what the hell is happening in my body. So how do we work around that? Because your body creates cholesterol. You actually need cholesterol. It's
absolutely.
a great thing. It's one of the most
it's
important.
all your sex hormones, everything.
Everything.
Yep. Mood. Yep.
Because very low cholesterol is actually also a bad thing. And they don't talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Like mainstream, they don't publicize it. It's always just get on the medication. And it's like, okay, well, how high is too high? What other ways? Now I have to ask myself, I have to find a different workaround. Okay, I have an issue on my LDL receptors, meaning my body's producing cholesterol. My receptors are not keeping up with that. And that's why it's causing the cholesterol to get backed up and not, filter out the way it's supposed to in a normal body.
Right.
How else can we remove cholesterol out of the body if it's not through the LDL receptors? Or is there anything I can do to give some special powers to my LDL receptors in hopes of activating a few more? These are great questions to ask.
Is this how you got onto all your salads for the fiber? No, I'm serious. It helps to bind it up. I'm serious. Is that how you got onto your salads?
I got onto my salads, and I'll tell you why. Okay. So I thought,
she loves salads.
Like it's a hobby of hers.
You probably, yeah.
I think everyone now knows. I think everyone knows me as like the salad girl. It's like, if you want a good salad, go to Nino. She'll give you her recipe.
That's why you've been sharing all those salads on Instagram for the group. Now I'm realizing that.
She's like, hold on a second. No, so the way I got onto it is because I went vegan, and then I went raw vegan.
Yeah, I've been there too.
Living on the East Coast during the winter, FYI.
Amazing.
And I thought that I was going to heal myself. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
like, I was like, I figured it out.
Yep.
I'm going raw vegan. I'm not eating anything. Like, no, I'm eating stuff, but I'm,
Talk
not
about crashing your thyroid.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
I did. Because when I did my blood work, not just my thyroid, my triglycerides, which I never had a problem with, skyrocket high. Yep. And I was like, you have no idea. I think I cried actually after those test results, because I was so devastated, because I thought I had found the cure, and I thought that like what worked for someone else was going to work for me, and it didn't.
Right.
And so that's when I had to do a major pivot. And I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't working. And all my friends, all my family thought I was absolutely insane, because all I did was live on salads. I literally lived on salads and fruit.
Yep.
And they called me insane. I would bring a salad to a restaurant. I swear to God, I have literally brought
a salad to a restaurant.
A glass
like
container. A glass container with a salad out to a restaurant, watching everyone eat. And they're like, I'm like, it's one person. They're, everyone else is eating. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine.
You probably get a lot of grief from the staff. The restaurant staff in those days.
They don't even like when I bring my water bottle.
Well, I'm sorry. Like, make better salads. Like
same thing at the movie theater. Like,
exactly.
Sell something that's not a chemical.
Yeah, she wasn't hiding it though.
It.
Normally, if I go to the movie theater and I bring snacks, like they're going in my bag or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm smuggling them in.
Yeah,
but I just say I have a medical condition.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I need salads.
Only.
Exactly. So then, and then from there, I did a massive flip and went high protein, high fat, low carb. So, and then I started to eat meat. I started to eat fish again. And, I brought back like the basic proteins, still whole foods. Like, I don't really eat anything processed, but going from a high carb vegan diet to a low carb, high protein, high fat, because I found a lot of research on reversing an underactive thyroid through a high protein, high fat lifestyle. Because I said to myself, all right, let's, put the cholesterol healing on the back burner for now, because like I've tried everything and it's just not working. But, my thyroid isn't genetic. It's an issue that my body is dealing with. So let me target this first. It wasn't the first thing I was targeting. I was focused on the cholesterol. And I put that on the back burner and said, okay, let's do this. And it worked.
Yeah. You reverse engineered it.
It worked. And I was in shock. Now, I couldn't come off of my medication completely right away, because I actually did do that. Day 2, I barely could get out of bed, because I guess my body just went haywire. And so I was like, I can't do that. So we're going to have to take this in baby steps. So it took me 6 months, about 6 months, I want to say, to come off of my medication, because I had to do it gradually. I would like lower my dosage, and then every other day, every 2 days, while keeping up with this new lifestyle that I decided to go in. And then eventually came off it completely. And still, I think it took a couple of months for my body to, bring itself back.
That's the lever system. That's the balance. Because if you go too aggressively,
right,
then all of a sudden your body's like, wait, I don't know how to do this on my own yet. And then, you are more symptomatic, or you bottom out in some way. So, yeah.
So yeah,
You
so that's
just
a
covered all
personal
of it.
story.
Wow.
So I have a question, because I'm sure, I'm on the registered dietitian side. You've probably heard people come in or talk to you about, okay, like I'm, going to do vegan, I'm going to do, paleo, I'm going to do carnivore. I mean, school of thought, is there, in your personal opinion, do you think that there's one that's better that suits all? Is it just a, case by case basis? Obviously, I'm sure that's true to an extent, but what are your opinions on the different schools of diets?
Absolutely. Good question. So number one, I'm all about context. I think with that, and that is the thing I think that we miss the most. So you'll see the person who maybe lost a ton of weight, on the vegan diet. So they become influential. They become like an influencer. They maybe get a little certification or something so they can talk a little more about nutrition, but that's what they sell. They influence the vegan diet because it worked for them. And that's an assumption. There's less context, right? So that's where in 22 years, I think that is the one thing that I could say that in one regard, you can thrive off anything that your body needs, whatever diet might be. The other thing is that we need to know that a lot of times we're coming into a season and coming out of a season biochemically and physiologically. That's a whole other thing. Let's say a woman who is hoping to conceive is in a different season than someone who's menopausal, correct?
Yes,
right?
correct.
Or somebody who is postpartum is very different than preconception.
Oh, yeah.
Different season, different needs. So that's where I think we need to have some flexibility. And number one, and just be open to it. And some seasons are much shorter. So in one regard, some people can do really well on, say, like, there's a lot of juice cleanses and I'm going to fast for 3 days and do juices or something like that. And I have my thoughts about all kinds of things. But in a certain season, if there was a biological reason that maybe you needed to let a certain system within your body rest, and it allowed you to sort of bypass all the other metabolic processes by doing, let's say, vegan or juicing or something for a couple days, then there's the context, because you're actually giving rest to a certain body system by doing that. Same thing if somebody who is keto, carnivore, or just like super, super low carb, there may be a season where you're actually going to rest sort of that blood sugar or that your basic Krebs cycle and using glucose and glycogen to break down in order to have, your main fuel source, and maybe moving more toward ketones or something like that. There can be context around that. However, we also need to know what other biochemical and physiological things are going to happen with that, and what happens long term, and what happens when it's the person that originally went into it because maybe they were, they had a cancer diagnosis and, they really wanted to just sort of nourish their body in a certain way. I'm not going to say anything specific to that. I'm just going to say they decided they really wanted to flood the body with certain nutrients. But then also what happens when you suddenly stop flooding it? Do things get worse? Do they maintain? What do we do? There's a plan for getting on and a plan for getting off. So even I look at that with medications, but I also look at that with food and diets when people want to do a special diet. With that said, I'm going to give you a 3-bear analogy. You've heard of the 3 little bears, right? So these bears are a little bit different, but we have a grizzly bear, we have a polar bear, and we have a panda bear. So if I were to ask you, what do panda bears eat?
Do you remember?
Bamboo, right. So they're basically vegetarians. They're giant bears. They are the laziest, slowest.
Yeah.
They look like an overweight bear, right? And they're vegetarians. They eat no meat. Then you have your polar bear. Your polar bear is in the, let's say, like Arctic, colder environments, and they eat blubberous animals. They eat fats, a ton of fats. Yeah. There's no vegetation where polar bears are. Yeah. There are no vegetables. There are no vegetations. There's no grains. Right. Then you have your grizzly bear, who's a switch hitter. They'll go forage some berries that they find wildly, but they'll also go catch a salmon in the stream. Yeah. So that's your metabolism in a nutshell, in context. So typically the body will have a baseline metabolism, which is what your genetics probably is geared most toward. So with that in mind, if let's say, you're Scandinavian or Eastern European, that's probably going to be closer to what your baseline metabolism actually is. So, you know, our ancestry for me is like Eastern European. Supposedly we have some Viking blood, maybe a little Scandinavian, something in that mix, right? So we lived in colder environments typically. We had a balance of things. But somebody who is in Japan might be different, you know, and India completely different. So you can kind of see that. So with that in mind, that may be where we want to get our metabolisms back to eventually. But, you know, I was in a very different season when I first had my daughter and I was postpartum, and the foods I needed, even the amount of carb I needed.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah.
Everything that I just told you guys went out the window during
Yeah.
pregnancy.
Yeah. But then, you know, your body may want to shift back. So on the other end, though, what I typically found in private practice is that my vegans who came to me had a crash thyroid.
Yeah.
I would be willing to say almost 99% of the time. And,
That is so
and they'd be
wild.
like, this is the diet I eat. I eat a ton of avocado. I eat this, I eat that. And they're like, but I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's or, you know, Graves' disease, which is a little bit different, but certain things, thyroid cancers even and stuff.
Oh my God.
But yet they're eating this perfect vegan diet, right? So there's a lot to say behind it. I think in a certain season, it could be appropriate temporarily, but long term, the nutrition's just not there.
Yeah.
Because it's actually, a lot of plants are harder to break down so that we can extract that and actually consume it. Even something that might be super high in protein, but what percent of it are we actually absorbing and utilizing? And also, like, what's super quick energy, you know? So like your raw honey, maple syrup, fresh fruit, you know, fructose, sugars that are in there, that's very readily available, good sugars, along with the balance of your vitamins and minerals.
Right.
So like if you were to look at an apple, if you had to guess about how many vitamins and minerals you think are in an apple, and if I've said this to you, don't answer.
Oh, I don't know.
If you had to guess approximately vitamins or minerals, take a wild guess.
50. I don't know.
An apple,
Yeah. Just
vitamins and minerals.
vitamins,
I've
minerals.
eaten a lot of
and-
salads with apples
and
in it.
we'll say
I know you
vitamins,
know
minerals,
this.
and we'll say
No, I actually don't. Surprisingly.
we'll say other kind of like micronutrients.
30.
So there's about 400 different
Okay,
nutritional,
we were both way off.
nutritional properties.
I haven't been in a nutrition class in a while.
So it's
I'm like, I just don't
Yeah.
have any clue.
so it's not, I'm not, and I'm actually, I should reference it differently, but I don't want to make it confusing, but it's not just vitamins and minerals, but it's the way they interact. So food from the world, from nature, as it was intended, is so fascinating when you get into it molecularly. I think that's why I still do this. Because when you look at the way that things interact within a food, so if you have 400 different kinds of compounds, we'll call them, in say just a piece of fruit, it's not just the vitamin C or potassium, it's what happens when vitamin C and potassium come together. What happens when you have phosphorus and calcium or, you know, in combination? So one of the things I'm seeing more recently, I think we're in still kind of the high protein craze of diet culture right now. That's a big one. And that can be okay. However, I'm not super convinced that we need this crazy amount of protein. And the other thing that it actually really needs to be balanced with, especially if we're eating mostly muscle meat, which would be like your chicken breast, your steak, anything that's a muscle tissue on the animal, is you need to also have enough collagen and glycine and those kind of more gelatinous cuts where it's the old-fashioned oxtail stew and the chicken feet in the soup. I know it sounds super, it's like a weird pot of soup, but it's all that collagen and all that gelatin and stuff like that. So that's super anti-inflammatory. But what it does is it also helps. So your muscle meat is high in phosphorus. And phosphorus is not necessarily a bad thing, but phosphorus competes with calcium in a sense. So what happens is if you have a very high phosphorus, you actually need calcium to balance it out. And if you don't have enough in your diet, then it'll start to pull it from bones and teeth and hair and other nails and things like that, because your bones are made of about 92 different minerals. It's not just calcium in your bones. There's about 92 minerals. That's why even when a woman, you know, after she has a child, you lose about 10% of your vitamins and minerals stores. and if your nutrition wasn't great, that's why they say, oh my gosh, my hair's falling out,
Right.
you know, or I had I was swollen all the time, electrolyte imbalance. There's other reasons for it too. But, you know, or they're like, oh my gosh, cavities. A lot of women, when they're pregnant, they get cavities. So
I can assume too that you probably feel like there's a link between postpartum depression and nutrient and gut deficiency too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's changes that happen within the gut microbiome just from pregnancy and preconception, and then pregnancy, and then postpartum. And I don't think it's spoken about enough. So there's that. There's the mineral loss. Because I'll give you an example. So I've worked in addiction recovery for quite a while now, 15 plus years, and teach a lot of groups. I actually educate CADCs. They're certified in alcohol and drug counselors. So I help them to obtain credits through a nutrition course, little like seminar thing that they can take. So my other area of expertise is nutritional psychiatry, where we're using nutrition for mental health, right? And being that I work in addiction recovery, which is also a lot of times a dual diagnosis with mental health disorder, but also addiction. What we find is when you look at, I love minerals, if you can't tell. I love mineral balancing. I used to run hair tissue mineral analysis and stuff like that to kind of see different patterns in the body, what it has to tell us. But with that in mind, typically, and I don't want to go too much into diagnosis, so I'm going to use more the anecdotal that I've experienced, and I stay in my lane. I can only work with vitamins, minerals, supplements, and foods and what they have to offer. So I plug into that, and a lot of my patients genuinely do need to have the balance of medication still, even with all the great nutrition, but they do better. Right. So there's studies out there, if you look at it in bipolar disorder specifically, and if you were to actually look at their copper and zinc balance, you will find in a lot of cases, if we studied more of them, that people with a copper imbalance will also present with bipolar tendencies. And there's this cross linkage where basically, if you're very imbalanced in certain minerals, and I'm highlighting copper just for the sake of, you know, it's keeping it kind of simple. Copper specifically, when it's imbalanced, creates these kind of psychiatric like behaviors or
I actually didn't know that. That's
presentations.
fascinating.
And they
Wow.
present a lot like bipolar disorder. So I started questioning how many of my patients truly have bipolar disorder, and how many of them who also have been substance users for a long time, who ate one Big Mac every couple days and did a lot of damage with substances, are actually just imbalanced in their minerals.
Wow.
And how much, if we plug into that, could we actually help them to feel better mentally and emotionally? Could it, instead
before
of
bringing them on medication,
or even if they're on it, do they need all 5 medications? Because they also tell me how lethargic they are and they can't focus, and they, you know, they need this to sleep and this to wake up, and they're, you know, whatever.
Right.
So that I would say almost 100% of my patients have said, I don't want to be on all this stuff. I just don't know what else to do.
I don't think most people do. And I think that's important to know as well. I truly don't think that we as humans are proud of, you know, if there is someone that is having to take and be dependent on multiple medications, I don't think they're proud of it. Yeah. I just think that it's a difficult conversation to sometimes navigate with a doctor, depending on who your doctor is, because, and I've been in those rooms, like I had mentioned, and you sometimes walk in and you have a doctor who's very open to the holistic, natural side of things, and they see the benefits and they understand that food can play a factor in minimizing how much is required. And then sometimes you walk into a room, you tell them where you're at, and they say, yeah, forget it, that's nonsense, and no, you're on this forever, so get used to it. I have literally been told that.
Yeah.
And then you walk out and you just feel so depleted. Yeah. So if you are not educating yourself and you're not aware, like even something like the copper, like I didn't even know that part. Yeah. So if you're not aware and you're not being your own self-advocate, right? who's going to do it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most people just don't know where to start. And
Yeah.
can you get yourself to the proper channel and
Yeah,
get
why
the
don't
proper
you share like
resources?
some solutions
So,
or like
let's do that.
where people can start or
Yeah.
like if they're interested and you know, things like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an analogy to go into that, and we'll go be quick. So you know how we have the factories of, say, like automobiles? I like cars. Can you tell? I've always been a car person. But you have the factory for the automobiles, and then you have the raw material. So you have all the parts. So in order to be able to make an automobile, you can't have all the parts and no tools or equipment to put it together. You can't. And you also can't have a beautiful factory with the highest grade of all the equipment and no raw material. Mm-hmm. We saw that during 2020 where it was like microchips for cars didn't exist. Right. So there were no more cars for a season or something. So your gut is the factory for a lot of your neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the cell signalers that send signals. And it actually, for the most part, goes from the gut to the brain. So as I was saying before, in 2011, when I was studying, conducting research, it was on something called the enteric nervous system, now known as the gut brain or the gut brain axis. I feel like it's a buzzword now. But in 2011, no professors would take me on for my thesis statement, my research. They read through my proposal and they said, this sounds interesting. I've never heard of it. I don't think you have anything to research. I was denied by probably 4 or 5 doctorals, in our department. And then one woman, I love her so much. I wish I knew where she was. She was from the UK, brilliant mind. And she said, Sara, I don't know anything about this topic, but I'm willing to learn alongside you. And she said, and if this is something, I think you found something. I think you're onto something here. And so we did. So my study was on the enteric nervous system, the gut-brain axis, as it relates to mood disorders and inflammation of the gut.
Wow.
So when the gut is inflamed, I'm going to summarize how this started, but when the gut is inflamed, then it's like it's operating a whole different operating system. Mm-hmm. And it's like as if your car has all the check engine lights going on, and you're like, I better baby this thing. I better not drive it too fast, let it get too hot. I got to get some fluids, whatever it is. And so when you're inflamed, it's like all the check engine lights are on and it's not going to be absorbing all the nutrition. 90%, 80 to 90%, about 70% of your nutrient absorption happens in your small intestine. And it is huge. If you actually laid out your small intestine, it's huge. It's disgusting, but it's huge. So with that, if that's inflamed, now you've got chaos going on. You're not absorbing properly. You're also having things like the leaky gut or, permeable, semi-permeable membrane. And you've got things that are not supposed to be in your blood filtering right through because it's inflamed and the fort is not being protected, by the cavalry and the castle. Right. That's one aspect. So now you're becoming depleted. You're having inflammatory things come in. And then you start seeing fibromyalgias and you start seeing aches and pains and joint pains and stuff like that, weird rashes and whatever too. Then you've also got your raw material, which is your nutrition. So if we're talking about mental health specifically, mental health, we think often of serotonin. They call that like your happy hormone. Dopamine, which is like your reward or your achievement. Then you've also got GABA. So your GABA is like your body's natural anti-anxiety button. It produces it on its own. Relaxation, less anxiety. Then you have some other lesser ones. You got your epinephrine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, things like that. Endorphins, when you exercise, those are all neurotransmitters. And what they do is they found that within the gut, there's more cell signaling than there is in your spinal cord. So if you think about how fragile your spinal cord is, like if somebody, God forbid, has an accident, horseback riding, quadding, something like that, one nick in the wrong way and they're paralyzed or paraplegic. And it's not that they don't actually have arms or legs or they're not, but there's no connection. Mm-hmm. And yet, so a perfectly otherwise put together system does not have the processor, the signals to do that. And I just told you there's more cell signaling, there's more neural pathways, neurotransmitter pathways in your gut than your spinal cord.
That is actually wild.
And here's another one. About 80 to 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. Wow. 50% of dopamine is made in your gut. Wow. So that's the raw material in your factory. So especially when you see things like depression, anxiety, mood disorders, and also substance use and whatnot, we know that in a lot of those guts, and this was part of what the research found, was that inflammatory foods that would trigger inflammation, people had a higher rate of depression, anxiety. And I have tons of studies, and I teach and lecture on this. I teach college and whatnot too. And it is fascinating. So the way that I like to look at it is repair and restore the actual gut, the mucosal lining, get the inflammatory things lower and out, quiet the fire, get some of those check lights off. And we replete at the same time. And a lot of times the very things that are going to quiet all that inflammation down are also the repleting things. Yeah. And I think that's where it becomes fascinating that that is how nature intended it to be. Right. So for instance, we call it, you know, in like Eastern Europe, it's eating nose to tail, which means they utilize every part of the animal.
Oh yeah.
And when you look at good farming practices,
literally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When you looked at good farming practices, there's a whole stance behind that. But when you take, let's say you're going to have like the oxtail soup. I feel like that's a good classic example. So yes, you have some muscle meat in there, but you've also got that gelatinous glycine. Glycine is super anti-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. It's also a mood booster, and it also helps you sleep deeper. Right. So people are taking glycine supplements and inositol and magnesium and things to help them sleep.
But you can just have some
also
soup
in the food. And there's things we do need to supplement in modern day society, absolutely. But a lot of it we really don't.
Yeah.
A lot of it, if we just eat that good diet of quick energy, vital nutrients as it was intended, we're going to do better. Finding how to do that is different for everybody, and that's the context. If somebody was a vegan for 10 years, you're not putting them on a carnivore diet. You're not even just all of a sudden pounding, animal-based foods. We're going to start really low and slow. Yeah. We're going to start with, like a few tablespoons of maybe like some yogurt and then maybe egg, and maybe it's just egg white at first or yolk and little bits and pieces. Because it's like switching my car. I really do use a lot of car analogies. I never realized this. It's like switching a car from gasoline to diesel.
Right.
So car will run even if you just pound it with diesel and it doesn't need it, but it's not going to be good for the overall system. You're going to have other issues. There's a way to convert it. Yeah. So that's what we're essentially doing. And sometimes you may need some extra supplemental support, like B vitamins or something to kind of come up alongside it and do that. So I don't know if is that answer it a bit?
Yes,
and
yes.
Any follow-up questions?
No, I think
we'll
as general as I
we'll have to do, I think, another episode.
We'll have to bring
maybe
you back
just on the gut.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this is so I think it's fascinating. I think it opens up a whole nother conversation. And I think we should definitely have you back on to kind of get deeper into that connection as well. But we appreciate you coming on and sharing all your expertise.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
looking forward to, I was going to say, is there anything else you want to say about the shop real quick before we
wrap
up?
very quickly. Do you want to open it?
Yeah. So I'll open it and you speak, and then we'll add the link to the shop below this episode for you guys.
So we are slowly releasing everything, and something that's actually really important in all this health sphere is also guarding your nervous system and not being overly stressed out. So it's a family owned and operated. It's my husband and I, really. And I have a daughter, I homeschool. Like, I'm very busy. So, so we're releasing everything one at a time. So it's I call it elderberry season because I feel like people know it. But if you look on that, it actually is elderberry syrup with something called Immu Plus. Yes. And that's just our way of saying that it's also got other components. So it's not your typical elderberry syrup. I made it specifically originally for me because I have an autoimmune and I can be really sensitive even to herbs because they work. And some herbs are more stimulating and they help to stimulate an immune response so that it's robust. Right. And then other herbs will quiet it and whatnot. So elderberry syrup can actually be a little bit more on the stimulating side. So I wanted to balance it. And this is the formula that I created years and years and years ago. So it actually has something called nervine properties, which are calming. And basically, as that immune response is coming up a little bit, it's also keeping it just to what your body needs. So it doesn't go over that threshold. And then additionally, it's also naturally preserved. There's no preservatives, there's nothing. It's raw honey and it's the formula itself. So everything from fresh clove to ginger, everything's organic, fresh. Even the companies I partner with, who I trust, I have good standing relationships with. I had this company I use, they are in Greece, and she called me this morning and she's like, how are you doing?
I love that.
Yeah, and it was really sweet, and it grows on the Greek mountainsides. So your tea has some of it in it.
Oh, there you go.
So the Immu Plus is a super special blend, and then it's also has a little bit of a gut component too. So rather than add an alcohol or glycerin, which can help keep it more shelf stable, I actually put a little bit of apple cider vinegar that's in a 4-week infusion with more herbs. So everything from thyme to rosemary, lemon peel, it's on the label.
It's great
here.
because I feel like all
I'm
the shelf stable
excited.
supplements you see for elderberry have
something in it.
You should really, you should try it. You'll definitely, you'll try it. But it also tastes good. And a lot of kids like it. So that's one thing. My friend was like, are you going to bring it back? You know? And I finally can say it's back. She's like, it's the only one my kids will drink, you know? So it's raw honey, it's the vinegar, and it's all the herbs and spices themselves. It's super balanced. You can take it all year, but you change that up a little bit.
Right.
So that's the first thing. And then we also will have some, I call them functional organic teas, because all of the teas, even though they taste really good, they serve a functional property. So like the tea that you got, which is our evening meadow tea, has immune support, but it's also got some really key things to help calm your nervous system and help you rest.
I'm like, I need that.
But here's what happens.
I know, that's
Yeah.
She said, we have this one or we have this one with all these properties. I was
Oh
like,
yeah, she picked this one for you.
this one.
She picked that one for you
I
specifically.
said 1000% don't give her anything else.
She needs the evening meadow. Yeah.
But it also plugs into your immune system a little bit, because what happens, you're out and about all day. You're a mom, right? Stressed out, trying to juggle everything. Businesswoman, mom, everything.
Yeah.
Then you try to rest at night and your immune system's depleted. So you need to plug into that also. And in our syrup is also nettle. Nettle is super, all the micronutrients you could want. Yeah. So this is plugging into your immune system to replete your nutrients and your micronutrients. And then it's also helping a little bit bolster that immune system while keeping your nervous system calm. Because if you're stressed and you're running on adrenaline and cortisol, you're going to get sick. Yeah. You're more likely to get sick because your body that's your alarm bell to say you need to slow down.
Yeah.
So, I love the nettle tea. I got it when we were in Greece actually, and I'm like out, and now I know I can't get it again. The kind that I liked until I go back. So this is great.
Well, you tell me, because I have a purveyor there that I love and trust and adore. Yeah. Okay.
And we'll link Sarah's shop down to this episode so you guys can check it out, and then we'll make an announcement also when you roll out your new products for the springtime, because I think this is so awesome. I appreciate you sharing the relation, talking about the science behind everything. I think we'll definitely have you back on.
Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching today. We're really excited about this episode. Follow us for more information and see more episodes on the Signature Sip Instagram site, wherever, I don't know.
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.